at the moment is kind of my best bet. Thank you.
Rob,
There's only 15 minutes to go, so not long now, and you can hit the slopes.
I'm Paul Buser. I'm here from the state of Indiana in the United States. I help manage the University of Notre Dame endowment. And this question's about RV Capital. This is an amazing day and weekend. You hit the 10-year mark. You got 15 extra chairs in here because of your clout now. You hired some young professionals to get the sound check going and hold the sign out front. So you've really made it now. I want to dovetail just on Nate's question on innovation and then your response on moats. What is the moat for RV? And full disclosure, we're not investors, and we regret that, but we view you now as a Google or Facebook. And so if we're making that decision now, you've made it. You don't run billions of dollars, but things are in place and you have a long history. What are the threats to you to your moat, and how do you think about widening it, given that in most investment firms, the sinking of the moat is usually an internally driven thing? I just love your perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This kind of we'll go a little bit into some of the things we're talking about tomorrow, about the way I'm kind of set up and why it's the case. But I think I think I have quite a decent competitive advantage. For a number of reasons. First, it's maybe being a one-man show. It's kind of a very non-intuitive way for any type of business, and maybe an investment business, to be set up, and probably a lot of people are kind of skeptical about it, and that's why it's kind of difficult for other people to replicate. But if you think that if there was any type of economy to scale of investing, then even if it was minute, a Fidelity or a BlackRock is so many thousands of times bigger than me that it would be effectively impossible to compete. And so the fact that not just me, but other investors working on their own or in very small teams have beaten the market over a long period of time, I think tells you that probably the smaller the team, the better, and it's tough for people to replicate, because most people wouldn't give their capital to that type of structure. What I think is also super difficult is to have the permission and the capital from your investors to run a very concentrated portfolio. So, I kind of had this dilemma when I set up RV Capital, that I knew to at least have the chance of beating the market, you had to have a degree of concentration. It's, of course, absolutely no guarantee to beat the market, but if you've got 50 or 100 stocks in your portfolio, you're definitely not going to beat the market. And the kind of dilemma is with, at least in Europe, the traditional fund structures insist on having a certain level of diversification. And so if you're kind of interested in attracting capital and stuff, then you're most likely going to take one of those structures which can be publicly marketed. And I wanted to invest in a concentrated way, which meant I had to structure the fund as a hedge fund. And then it was kind of a really weird thing, because most people can't invest in a hedge fund, but to the extent they can, there's normally some kind of a long-short type market neutral wish in there. So I kind of had a structure which didn't really have a natural buyer for it. And fortunately, over time, I found investors, and that's fantastic. But that's also kind of a huge entry barrier. And then the third area of competitive advantage, I think, is just the type of investors I have. So, when I started out, I thought, okay, I'm now a fund manager. I better go out and find some investors, and so I would sort of go out and see if anyone would listen to what I have to say. And unfortunately, a few people did, so they would take up a lot of my time, but then tell me they couldn't invest because I'd only been around for a year, or the fund was only 10 million, and I was like, couldn't you have told me at the start of the meeting that you can't invest in someone who only has 10 million? You could have saved the last 2 hours. And so anyway, I gave up on sort of marketing and just sort of did my thing and sort of hoped over time it would draw people's attention. And the great thing about doing it that way is that the people who kind of reach out to me were ones that have kind of self-selected to my type of model. So I would never get someone reach out to me today who doesn't invest in a one-man show. You know, they simply wouldn't reach out in the first place if that was something they weren't looking for. So, and I think as well that's a source of competitive advantage. So, I think it's you know, I think there's some competitive advantage there, which gives me an opportunity to beat the market. But whether we continue to beat the market will really depend on me finding good ideas and analyzing them properly. So that's what I need to concentrate on.
And how about widening the moat? So if those are the sustainable moat, how do you think about it growing?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I missed that. So, you know, is the moat growing? And you know, that's the kind of the wonderful thing is, you know, I have unbelievably loyal partners. You know, I don't think I've had a single meaningful redemption since the fund started. And you know, and quite understandably, when someone invests with you to begin with, they're presumably a little bit enthusiastic about what they do, but what I'm doing, but probably also a little bit skeptical. Is it what it appears to be, and all that kind of stuff. And you know, with every passing year that someone's invested and sees I'm kind of doing things the way I say I'm doing them, they become more comfortable and you know, more willing perhaps to give me permission to do unusual and counterintuitive investments, and more willing to kind of accept that there's going to be times of poorer performance. And that's an amazing privilege, because most funds don't have that that opportunity. If you work for a big fund management company and have a few poor quarters, you know, the salespeople start beating you up and telling people that you're not good enough anymore and someone else should be replacing you and all that kind of stuff. So it effectively makes people think in a lot more short-term way, and kind of feel lucky that I don't have to engage in that game.